Welcome to Tramlines, a podcast from Agrii. I'm your host, Tony Smith, putting your questions to the experts. In this episode, we're talking to Don Pendergrast, Technical Manager for non-combinable crops at Agrii. Today, we're going to ask some key questions about Biosolutions. What are the benefits? Are there any disadvantages? And trying to make sense of where they do and can fit, helping UK growers now and in the future. So, good morning, Don.
Good morning, Tony. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Don, and a very warm welcome to you here on Tramlines. Really looking forward to hearing about some of the work you've been doing in R&D. Today, we're going to be talking about Biosolutions. And your title that you offered up was The Good, the Bad and the Complicated. So we're going to explore that, and I'm really interested to learn about Biosolutions. But first of all, you're technical manager for non-combinable crops. So tell us a bit about what are those crops that you are looking at?
Yeah, so in effect, it's sort of in a shorthand, it's anything that doesn't go through a combine. But really, the key things I'm focusing on are veg, fruit, so top fruit and soft fruit. And then I'm also involved with sugar beet, and I work quite closely with Nick Windmill, who many people know on potatoes.
And you work in an R&D function, don't you, Don?
Yeah, so I'm one of the technical managers. So my whole career's really been around R&D and policy development. So I'm sort of one of the techies, as people will often say.
Yeah, okay. So as one of the techies, what are you technically looking at in R&D? Where's your focus in these non-combinable crops at the moment?
So, I mean, it's obviously a massive time of change for the industry as a whole. I think we're sort of, if I look at what we're doing in terms of the trials work and the sort of the bits we're focusing on at the moment, probably the main areas we're looking at are digital technologies, and then the other big one is Biosolutions, alongside the sort of the thinning pipeline of conventional chemistry as well. But certainly that and the reason I wanted to talk about Biosolutions today is that I know that's kind of very much kind of hot topic area, but obviously that title of Biosolutions covers a lot of different products, a lot of different types of things.
Yeah, absolutely. And so let's dive in and find out about these Biosolutions, Don. So to help us all, what are Biosolutions?
Yeah, I've been working on this for a long time, and still, I think Biosolutions is kind of the best catch-all term that people have come up with, and it's the term we use in Agrii. But I think broadly that, well, in effect, they're products that are sourced from a biological base. So they're sort of biologically built. They're not synthetically generated. And there are two broad types. So there's biostimulants. So those are products that basically stimulate the metabolism, generally the sort of metabolic processes within the plant, to kind of get them to what I would describe as upregulate. So to basically stimulate the different elements of their growth pattern, or the development of fruit. They're not fertilizers specifically, so they're not bringing nutrition. They're actually affecting the metabolism of the plant. And then the other side is biocontrol. So those are effectively biological pesticides, so covering things like bioherbicides, biofungicides, bioinsecticides, and there's also a kind of subgroup called physical insecticides as well that sort of fits in there. Yeah. Does that give you a broad feel?
Well, yes, you'll have to ask the listeners, of course, but it certainly helps me. So why and how do these help us, or could help us, with a view to, and you made this phrase, a couple of words, you said thinning synthetic chemistry. So what do you mean by that thinning synthetic chemistry, and how can these biosolutions potentially help us?
Well, I think it's no secret. I think you'd have to be hiding under a rock to not have noticed that we are and have been for a quite a long period of time losing, losing certain synthetic chemicals, certain chemical pesticides that the industry has used very effectively for food production over the last 60, 70 years in some cases. But the regulation barriers have become higher. There's sort of increased focus, ability to go down to really minute levels in terms of understanding how those chemicals are moving through the environment, how they're breaking down, and what that's resulting in is that there's basically a reduction in the amount of sort of what we would call conventional synthetic pesticides coming through, and so there's gaps opening up in the sort of the armory for control and management of pests, weeds, and diseases.
Yeah, very interesting. And so you're working in R&D.
Yeah.
So how and what are you doing to help us understand how these biosolutions could help us?
Yeah, so the whole area of biosolutions isn't new. Some of the products that are around have been around for a very, very long time. Is we're running when we get a new biological product through, a new biosolution, we are testing it to look at what it's going to work on. Does it work? And then if we find that it does work, how do we get the best out of that? So that actually where to use it, when to use it, and when not to use it. Because these things are, as I was originally going to go with the good, the bad, and the ugly, using the old Western terminology for the title, but I thought actually they're probably not ugly, they're just complicated.
Yeah, and I think that's a really interesting word that you've used there. Complicated, or is it just? It's complex, isn't it? It really is, and I can hear that in your descriptions, and I can also hear this level of understanding that you have, which is really interesting, and the work that you're doing at Agrii, looking at these biosolutions. So, can you help us give some examples of the areas that you're looking at?
Okay, so what I need to say at the start of this is one of the things that this is still very much a work in progress. But one of the things that I think we are doing, one of the key things I'm trying to do is to make sure that we're picking up. If somebody has some success with a bio solution in potatoes, providing we want to have a look at whether that might work. Say they see something good against late blight in potatoes. Would that work against a similar pathogen, something like downy mildew in onions, for instance, and alliums? So there's kind of that's the kind of approach that we're taking. So I wonder probably whether a good way to do this is to kind of go through, particularly focusing on veg, whether to go through kind of what we're seeing that's good, what's bad, and what is complicated. Would that be maybe a good way to do it?
Yeah, I think so. And I think that would be really interesting for listeners to hear, where they could be really helpful.
So what I wanted to do with this when we were talking was to make sure to tell people that there are some good stories here.
Yeah, let's hear them.
So
We like good stories.
Yeah, absolutely. The worst thing would be if we just we wouldn't want this to be too mournful.
No.
So one of the areas we're definitely succeeding in, I think, is starting to find biological fungicides that are now, not all of those have reached the market yet. So we will often look at things 3 or 4 years before they get to the actual commercial market, to kind of see how they're working and to look at getting the best out of them. But what we are seeing is in the trials with the near market products, we're seeing a number of biofungicides that are looking positive against diseases like powdery mildew. Particularly sort of the plant, what we would call the plant extracts. They're quite nice as products often because they can be quite easily mixed with other fungicides and other chemistry, which isn't always the case for some products like microbiologicals. So I'm getting a bit techie here, but we're seeing really positive results there. We've got a really good product that we were using in fruit that is commercial now, which is a product called Protector. Which is effectively, to make it simple, it's effectively a yeast product. But what it does is it basically outcompetes the diseases that might infect the surface for the plant or the fruit. So we're using that very effectively in fruit against botrytis, but we're now looking for that to move via some emus. We're looking to get that moved into some of the leafy salad crops, and also to look at getting that possibly into the legumes, in some of the minor legumes as well. So there's some positive stories there. We know there are some other products that are a little bit further out that are showing some quite good efficacy against rusts as well. So there is a particularly positive story around biofungicides. And this year as well, with a biostimulant product that we've been looking at for a number of years, which has shown sort of promising results consistently, which is something quite big with biostims. We haven't really seen that before. And we've also had some positive results with an endophyte. Now, endophytes, I always think are one of the most fascinating, sorry, I'm coming really geeky now, one of the most fascinating technologies. They've been really effectively used in other parts of the world, but we're really just kind of scratching the surface with them in the UK at this point. But that's quite exciting. We've done some work in brassicas on the endophyte, and we've actually seen that we were able to get a benefit with a full nitrogen input. We were also able to potentially use the endophyte to effectively compensate for the loss of nitrogen. What the endophyte does is it enters the plant and effectively allows it to fix and uptake nitrogen when it wouldn't naturally be able to do it.
So that endophyte, let's just define that, because it is fascinating in terms of a direction of travel in helping us with crop protection and crop husbandry. So it's often a bacteria or a fungus that actually lives within that plant for certainly a part of its life cycle. It doesn't cause damage to that plant, but it helps it. And here you're talking about helping it with its nitrogen.
Nitrogen use efficiency. Yeah, so endophytes are everywhere in the environment.
Sure.
They are literally everywhere in plants you might find growing in the garden, growing in the field. What the key is effectively what we do with them in a product is you apply them to the plant, and the key is to get the plant to take them up, and for them to be able to symbiotically integrate within the plant. That's the challenge, is being able to effectively do that. They can do, the endophytes as a broad technology can do lots of different things. Some of them can improve drought tolerance. They can sometimes have a sort of almost plant protection like qualities, but different endophytes do different things. Nitrogen use efficiency is obviously another area as well. So we see in places like America and New Zealand that they've actually used endophytes for a very long time as quite effective technologies. So there's something that I think shows great promise for the future. We're in the foothills at the moment of kind of learning about them in the UK and getting the best out of them. But there's potentially quite a lot to come there, I think.
Can I just ask you about toxicity and safety? Are these products benign and safe? What testing do they have to go through? Could you just give us a snapshot of that?
Again, I've got to make the distinction. We've obviously got biostimulants which don't go through a regulatory process. They currently in the UK go through under the fertilizer regulations. Park that, because I think your key question is really around biocontrol. So biocontrol products are registered plant protection products. So they go through the same regulatory processes. They will be evaluated by CRD in the same way that a pesticide will, in broad terms.
And Don, what's in it for the farmer, UK grower, or the agronomist giving advice?
There are going to be gaps in the control strategy for growers if we do not use biocontrol products and potentially biostimulant products as well. So actually the advantage is they help to ensure effective and sustainable control of pests, weeds, diseases, and actually they can help meet some of those environmental, if used in the right way, they can help meet some of those environmental criterias, particularly as well. They can be very useful from the perspective of minimizing residues on plants, which is particularly relevant to the fresh produce sector, where residues is a real kind of challenge for growers, and actually the utilization of these products in the right way can minimize the risk of issues with residues. And in fact, I won't talk about that. I think I'll do it in a future podcast. But we've had a very effective piece of work we've done on strawberries this last 2 years, where we demonstrate that actually utilising a biological program can actually sort of effectively remove any issues of residues whatsoever. I'm not promising that in every crop, but we've demonstrated we can do that.
Don, this sounds like there's some really, really good opportunities here with these solutions, so to speak. But you mentioned right at the start about the bad and the complicated. So what are those?
Okay, so to be fair, you've probably seen the complicated as I've talked it through. But if we go to the bads, I think we test every Biosolutions product that we're giving, that's promoted to the agronomy team, and that our agronomists are kind of taking out there, because one of the things we've seen is that a lot of products don't meet the cut at first look. Something that's worked in Southern Europe or Australia or New Zealand doesn't necessarily work in the UK, and so actually I guess the bad is that a lot of people I think have had experiences with products in the past that have been sold to them where actually that proper evaluation hasn't taken place. So we know there's a lot of products that have fallen by the wayside, and actually the reality is, even when you find something that works, you've got to position it. So a good example of that is actually we've had some good results in physical insecticides, but actually we know they're not as good as conventional insecticides. But what we've worked out is what's working, and then we've worked out where to position it in the strategy to make it most effective for use alongside conventional chemistry.
For growers, agronomists, in fact, anybody listening today, how do we all keep in touch with these exciting developments?
Okay, so I mean, obviously the agronomy, the sort of Agrii's agronomy team, the veg teams, the fruit teams, they are all being provided with this information on a regular basis. They'll be kept up to date with the trials work that we're doing. We also produce a regular newsletter that provides information on the work that we're doing in trials, so you can keep up to date, obviously through those two main routes, whilst also having access to the technical team that's there and can be found on the website.
Well, thank you, Don, for sharing such a valuable insight into Biosolutions and some of the work that you're doing at Agrii R&D, an exciting area that clearly has real potential for the future, helping UK growers. Thanks, Don.
Thanks, Tony. It's been really good to chat it through on the podcast.
That's it for this podcast, but do tune in again as we meet the experts throughout the season, exploring the many immediate and longer-term questions for growers and farmers in the UK. If you have any questions that you'd like us to ask the experts, email info@agrii.co.uk. See you next time.